Yesterday we spoke about everything happens before this moment here. This moment here is when the conclave starts. So, conclaves, as you know, they are always in the Sistine Chapel. These are the cardinals. The cardinals enter. They have to take their seat. They enter in precedence, which means from the less appointed or the lower rank to the first of the cardinal bishops. In this case, you see, the first guy is Cardinal George Cuvacad. Cardinal George Cuvacad is now the prefect of interreligious dialogue. If you see, he has a different robe because he's Indian Syro-Malabaran, and so he has a different robe as a cardinal. But he was the first. This is the master of ceremony. You don't care about him. He gets in, brings people in, it's over, it's out. But I will show you a couple of details. Then we'll go back, but first. So they go in order. This guy is Cardinal Mamberti. Cardinal Mamberti is the so-called protodeacon, so the first of the cardinals' deacons. What does the protodeacon do? He announces the Pope. This is the guy who actually announced the Pope. From now on, all the other cardinals are cardinals of the rank of priests. And then at the end, the cardinals at the rank of bishops. This is very much the gospel, you know. Who comes first is actually the last. Think about that. Comes first is actually the last. I will show you one tiny thing that nobody sees. This is Michelangelo, you know. You know where is Michelangelo in this picture? In this painting? See that? This is Michelangelo face with the beard. This is the way he signed. It's the face with the beard. There is also his face here around, but this is the profile of Michelangelo in the painting. Nobody can see it because it's well tailored, well done, but see? So it's just like God looking on you, and that's the reason why John Paul II wanted all the conclave to take place in the Sistine Chapel, because it has a meaning. Now, as you can see, the Sistine Chapel has been recently renovated, so it's bluer, because they figured that the colors were not as bright as they were in the beginning. It took like 2-3 months to do that. So yesterday we spoke about what happens between the death of the Pope and what happens during general congregations. And everything brings to this moment. So the conclave, as we said, is a rite. It is a rite, a ritual, that ends with an election. Since it is a rite, it has some rules. One of the rules is that no cardinal beyond 80 takes part to the conclave. But, as we saw yesterday, they take part to all the general congregations, if they want. In this specific conclave, the dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Re, was 89, so could not enter in the conclave. Still alive, he's 90 now, still in good health. It's better than many others, can say. Little deaf, but still. The sub-dean, generally, you know, the dean is not in, it's the sub-dean that takes place. Sub-dean was Cardinal Sandri, 83. Doesn't make it. So this conclave was actually ruled by the dean in the conclave, that was Cardinal Parolin. That was the first in ranks of cardinal bishops. Okay? So no dean, no sub-dean were in this conclave. It's pretty peculiar. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens. Now, when we say it's a rite, the rite begins with a mass. Conclaves always start in the afternoon. The mass is in the morning. This is the mass. It's called the Missa proeligendo Romani Pontifici. It's the Mass for the election of the Roman Pontiff. This is very important. This Mass is celebrated by the Dean, because the conclave is starting, but we're not still in the votes. So still there are all the cardinals here. Okay? So the Dean celebrates. What does the Dean do? The homily of this Mass is very important, because generally the Dean summarizes in the homily most of the things that have been said during general congregations, or at least some characters. For instance, in 2013, when Pope Francis was elected and Cardinal Sodano was Dean, Cardinal Sodano made a whole homily that was about, we need to go to peripheries, we need to go to the outward bands, we need to evangelize. And we were like, why is he saying that? He never said that in his life. Then Pope Francis was elected, and he started, we need to go to peripheries. So, and that in the moment when Pope Francis was elected and delivered the first speech, we immediately realized that actually Sodano was summarizing something he heard. So the homily is very important. You need to check what they say in the homily. In this case, the homily was particular because there were no quotes at all, or just one, but very mild, of Pope Francis. And when a dean does not mention the Pope who has just died, it mostly means that most of the cardinals are looking for some different profile. It was the way of the dean to say, we don't want a Francis II, we want something different. We're thinking about something different. Want is a bad word, but in the sense that we're thinking to change perspective, let's say that, okay? So the homily is very important. Everything has a meaning here. Even this is also obviously, even here they're displayed by presidents, so there is a procession, and they have to be around, you know, they're not in front. Generally they're in front. In this case they're around the altar. Because in this moment there is no Pope. So they all together govern. There is no Pope. This is sede vacante, remember this. Then, in the afternoon, so they go for lunch, and in the afternoon, they go to the Pauline Chapel. So you remember the map yesterday, there is the Sistine Chapel here, the Pauline Chapel is here, in the same hall, like Sistine Chapel here, Pauline Chapel over there, same hall. You might say that this did not happen in 2013. It is true, but because Pauline Chapel was being renovated in 2013. So they went directly from St. Peter's Basilica to the Sistine Chapel, but just because this was under renovation. In the Pauline Chapel, only the cardinals who will go to vote go, and they start the Vespers, the Ora Media, the prayer of the afternoon, because it's around 4, all together. And then they start this procession that goes outside, you know, this is the back of Pauline Chapel, goes outside. They obviously sing the litanies of the saints, and then they turn left and enter the Sistine Chapel where we found them before. It is a rite. Every moment here is important. Now, why it is important? Because they're not choosing the Pope. What we believe, whatever this rite says, is that these cardinals are not choosing the Pope. These cardinals are praying to figure out what the Holy Spirit inspired them. And that's why after the litanies, and you saw the procession, and they go each one of them in their spot, the spot has this green book. It's the regulation of the conclave. They need to have the regulations. Everybody has. So in case of doubt, everybody can check. And these are white sheets for notes. You know, they want to note what cardinals got more votes, you know, or their thoughts, prayer, somebody just pins something. But they have all of this here. And after the litanies, after they're all displayed, they have to swear in. You see, this is a very nice picture because this shows the formula. So they have to go in front of the altar. Everyone. There is not a collective thing because it's personal. It's their personal relation with the Holy Spirit. They're not swearing with all the cardinals. They're swearing to God. And this is the formula. This is translated into English. And I, Cardinal, and they say the name, do so promise, pledge, and swear, so help me God and this Holy Gospel, which I touch with my hands. In fact, they read it in Latin. Et ego Cardinalis, in the case of Prevost, et ego Cardinalis Franciscus Robertus Prevost. The name is translated into Latin. Sponde oveva curo, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex santa Dei Evangelia, quae manum ea tango. It's a very solemn moment. Now, you see this. This thing is not just happening before. We'll get to the ballots, but when they vote, they have to do the same thing all the time. You might ask why the vote operation takes so much time. They take so much time because everyone they must pledge in front of God. Every single time. It's not one forever. Because every single time you must reminded of your responsibility. As I said, there is a meaning. But what you don't know is that before the conclave, there are a series of officials that swear in, and they're not cardinals. This is, for example, the Master of Liturgical Ceremonies. Because the conclave is only for cardinals. But when the Pope is elected, there is the Master of Ceremonies and other people around. There is a secretary of the conclave, that is generally the secretary of the dicastery for bishops. There is the sostitute of the Secretary of State. They all wait right outside. When the Pope is elected, they come into place. So they will come in, they will accompany the Pope where he has to be. You see, when the Pope is elected and he comes out, there are not just cardinals. There is the Master of Ceremonies that hold the mic and so on. So these are the people who actually let the conclave happen. They cannot break the secret, and so they swear. I will tell you one story. When there was the conclave in 2013, Becciu, we spoke about Becciu, was sostituto. So he was one of those waiting. And when they called him for the Pope's election, he went in, obviously, and he wanted to know who was the Pope. When he comes in and he starts preparing, the Pope is not there. It's being prepared in another room. So just the cardinals there waiting for the Pope to come out dressed as a Pope. So he went to Cardinal Vegliò. I can give you names because it's been told. Cardinal Vegliò, that now is very old. Cardinal Vegliò is like larger than life. Vegliò is Milan, AC Milan fan. Okay? So Becciu went to Vegliò straight away and was like, Eminence, who did you vote? Who did you elect? And Vegliò was like, yeah, what did the Milan do? Did the Milan win? Was like that the question. And Becciu was, yes, the Milan won. Okay, it's Bergoglio. He didn't care that much. He wanted to know how the football match went. Because that's the story. So it happens. But this tells you there are people who actually are not involved in the voting process, but they need to be involved around. Also because they will have to do something I will show after. This is Ravelli, that is the Master of Ceremonies. And then there is the famous extra omnes. This is the moment when everybody who is not a cardinal goes out from the room. But there is an exception. This is not the last time they close the Sistine Chapel room. Since the conclave is a rite, during the general congregations there are preachers. So every morning and every afternoon there are two people that are entrusted to give a spiritual admonishment, homily, whatsoever, to the cardinals, to tell them, to prepare them spiritually. And then there is a cardinal, non-elector cardinal, that is called here to preach before the conclave. In this case, it was Cardinal Cantalamessa. That was the preacher of the pontifical household. So after that, everybody goes out. Cardinal Cantalamessa stays in. He delivers his homily, which we don't know about because it's closed door. It's just for cardinals. In 2013, Cardinal Grech, Prosper Grech, delivered an homily, and Pope Francis authorized to deliver it, so you can find it online. But it was after. Generally, you don't know what he said, because it's between him and the cardinals. Then after that, he does not vote. So he has to go out. But even the Master of Ceremonies went out, because that's for cardinals. So who opens and shuts the door? Any guess? No, because the dean is not. Okay. I'll show you. Let's get back here. So this cardinal, that is the youngest one, the youngest in creation, not the youngest in terms of, he goes to sit here. And this seat is the closest to the door. So the youngest cardinal, the youngest created cardinal is also the cardinal who actually gets to shut the door. In this case, Cardinal George Cuvacad. Because it's very easy, if he goes back up, the door is here. So the dean is on the other side over there. Actually, the dean presides, so why should he go? He has to do all this. Sistine Chapel is pretty long. I mean, it's not, in this case, you had 134 people sitting here. It's pretty long. You see that the ground is not the original one. You remember when we spoke about costs? One of the costs is that they do a wooden ground in order not to stamp on the Sistine Chapel, because this is pretty bad. You have a lot of people going back and forth every day. So this is a wooden ground that is just elevated. It's like 20 centimeters up. This is all built just for the conclave and destroyed after the conclave. And all obviously the chairs they have, but the tables, the desks, they don't. They built everything up since the beginning. You remember when we spoke about costs? Costs. There is an office in the Vatican that deals with that. It's the office so-called of the floreria. Floreria means like the flower thing, but because in the beginning it was an office that mostly dealt with displaying flowers in the altar and decorating the altars. Then from the decoration of the altars became a general decoration of everything, and then it became a general maintenance of all the things that are in the Vatican. It's the office of the floreria. So there is an office that does that. So it's not coming out of the blue. Let's get back to the fun story. Extra omnes, and then what happens? I want to show you. We were speaking yesterday about the particularity of this conclave. This conclave was the first conclave, we talked about that yesterday, where the majority of cardinals were English speakers. It's not the first conclave where the majority of cardinals are created by Francis. Francis created 108 cardinals during his life. 108 eligible to vote in a conclave, and 41 not eligible to vote, so already beyond 80. Not all of them went in the conclave because in 12 years, some of them turned 80 in the meantime. Benedict XVI, but these are the ones who actually went in. So there were 108 cardinals created by Pope Francis that were in the conclave. There were 22 created by Benedict XVI, 5 created by John Paul II, but in fact just 4 went because one was too sick to get there. So in all this conclave, you had 22 cardinals that actually participated in 2 papal elections. Francis, 2013, and this one. And just 4 cardinals who participated in 3. While the vast majority of cardinals had no experience at all of conclaves. They'd never been there, they didn't know the rules, they didn't know what happens. You need, as we said, 2/3. When you have 135 that become 134, means that you need 78 votes. Now I'll show you another thing. We were speaking about why English speaking. Well, this is in Italian, but I took this diagram because this gives you a visual how the College of Cardinals changed from Paul VI to Benedict XVI and to Pope Francis. This is next conclave. And it gives you a visual of how the continents are represented. You see Europe, Latin America. You see Latin America almost doubled from Paul VI to Francis. USA and Canada almost doubled because we divide generally. Africa almost doubled. No, more than doubled. They tripled. There was just one cardinal from Africa with Paul VI. Asia and Oceania 4 times. So you see, you pass from a conclave, not more than 50 years ago, a conclave where Europe was still central and Rome was still central, to a conclave when there is a general balance among continents. Now, this thing is not a political issue. You don't create cardinals because you want politically to help countries. You create cardinals because you respond to a need. The more the church is important, the more they need a pope's representative, high-ranking representative. The more the church is in trouble, the more it needs a high-ranking representative. For instance, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pizzaballa, was created a cardinal. Now, if you see, patriarchs are already patriarchs. So they can wear the red robes even if they're not cardinals. And generally, Patriarch of Jerusalem were not cardinals. Why did Pope Francis create Pizzaballa cardinal? Because in that heated situation in the Middle East, all the patriarchs of the other Christian confessions are eminences, are beatitudes, so I have higher rank. And to the Israeli authorities, the Latin Patriarch is a little less. They didn't think it was like as important as the others. So you create him a cardinal to give that church a strength. When Pizzaballa was created cardinal, the president of Israel invited him over. The president of Palestine invited him over. He had so many high-ranking meetings because he was a cardinal. Sometimes you need that to help a church. But this means also major responsibility because, as we said, all the cardinals must participate in the government of the church, which is never an easy thing. Then the other thing you must see is that how much the number increased. We were 135, which means 15 more than 120. Paul VI set the limit to 120. So you might ask why we had 135 if there is a limit. Because the Pope can do whatever he wants. If the Pope makes a decision that he wants more cardinals than 120, he can make it. Also, John Paul II went beyond. John Paul II in 2002 created like 40 cardinals altogether. It was a huge generational shift. For a while, there were 127 cardinals eligible to vote in a conclave. But then, they turned 80. Some of them died because it happens also that. Not only the old ones died, also the young ones died. For example, in the case of Pope Francis, there was the cardinal from Brunei, was 57. And he had a cancer and died in 3 months. He was never able to get the red biretta because he was created cardinal during COVID, right after COVID. So he could not move from Brunei to come to Rome and get the red biretta. And then he got the cancer and died. So you never know. That's generally. In this moment, we have, after the conclave, Pope Leo has not created new cardinals so far. And most of these people turned 80. In this moment, we have 123 cardinals eligible to vote in a conclave, because there were a lot, 79, 80. And by the end of next year, we have 117. So, we're back to normality. You might ask, and that would be a nice question, what happens if you turn 80 during the conclave? You go out in the middle or not? What do you think?
Maybe you cannot participate.
No, you participate. It counts, but you cannot go out if you participate, because then you're secluded. So the rule is this. You participate in the conclave if you are below 80 in the date when the conclave begins. 2013, Cardinal Casper was 79 and turned 80 in the meantime. So when the Pope was elected, he was actually 80, but he entered the conclave because he was 79. When you enter, you're not out. You cannot do that. But obviously, if you're 79 when the operation starts, it will be even unjust. Tell you, no, but you're getting older. We retire you before. We're talking about, 4 days. Generally, in the church, it works like that. Generally, when you have a position, and the position has a fixed term, if the position if your term expires after your retirement age, they keep you until retirement age. Now they're slightly changing. So last year, for example, there were a couple of appointments, minor appointments, of people that were already 72. And they were going to have 5-year term. Just to give you an example, very concrete. Presidents of Bishops' Conference, they all have a 5-year term, okay? But when you're 75, you step down. Then the Pope can decide you can stay until you're 80, but you step down. So in Romania, they elected the new president of the Romanian Bishops' Conference, that was Archbishop Perca, Archbishop of Bucharest, which was a normal choice. You choose the Archbishop of the capital so that he keeps also the relations with the government somehow. It's easier. And Perca was well esteemed. And they made the announcement and everything, and then the Vatican called and said, listen, this guy is going to stay 3 years. We don't know if the Pope is going to renew him, because you don't know that it's Pope's decision. So no, we're not going to accept an election of somebody that can eventually stay just 3 years. And they had to change. So now they're going toward that because it's more uncertain whether the Pope will keep that or not. Before there was a sort of custom. Then it always depends on bodies. For example, the Council of European Bishops' Conferences is composed by the presidents of bishops' conferences all across Europe. Obviously, you can be elected president of the council, but in the meantime, you're not a re-elected president of your bishop conference, because it can happen. In that case, you stay anyway president of the council until the end of the term. This happened, for example, with Cardinal Bagnasco, that was elected. Then 2 years after, he ended his mandate as president of Italian Bishops' Conference, but he kept the presidency until the end of his mandate. Fun story, it's not going to happen with Cardinal Nemeth, that is now vice president, but he's ending his mandate like in October. So he's vice president, he's no longer president, but he's not going to stay. That's a fun story. Now, yes?
Is there any reason why they set that 80 limit for those who can vote?
The 80 limit?
Yeah.
Mostly because when you get older, sometimes you're not lucid. So they needed a fence, an age fence. The legend says that when Paul VI was elected, because it was Paul VI who made the provision, Paul VI was elected with all the cardinals, and one of the cardinals kept voting for Raphael Merri del Val, that actually died 50 years before. So after that, Paul VI said, okay, we have this law set that at 75 we have to retire for normal reasons. So let's set a date for conclave as well in a way that, we can, it's a fence. Some people, they're 85 and they're still very lucid. Some people, they're 70 and they're not lucid. So you need a fence. You need a limit. The limit is 80 because 80 is the limit, general limit where everything ends. You know, when you're 80, you have no longer positions in the Roman Curia. For instance, a cardinal is member of the congregations, even if he's not president or bishop in charge, but he keeps being member until he's 80. When he's 80, out. When you're 80, you drop all the positions. Also because you need to favor a generational shift. If you keep the position until you're 90, there are people that live until 95. What you do? You know, it's like, it's a pragmatic thing. That's the reason. It's very, very pragmatic. But it was a way to put a fence. 80 is general for everything, also for the conclave. Now, I used that, the Vatican Media Explanatory, because it was already well done. But we're getting back to what you saw in the first picture. What do the cardinals do? As I said, they swear in, then close the doors, preach, close the doors. And then there is the ballot. First day, one ballot. They can also skip that. If it's late and they don't want to do it, the dean can also say, well, we can skip the first ballot. Generally, they do it because the first ballot is general assessment, you know. And then 2 ballots in the morning, 2 ballots in the afternoon. White smoke for Pope Leo came out in the middle of the afternoon, which means first ballot, first night, then 2, 3 in the morning, 4th ballot. Pope Francis came in the night, 5th ballot, in the night of the second day, 5th ballot. Okay? So it's 1, 4, 4, 4, 4. The white smoke or black smoke comes only at the end of the half day. So if 2 ballots go bad, there is just 1 smoke. Just to give an example. When Pope Leo was elected, first night, 1 ballot, black smoke. Morning of the day after, black smoke half day, because the 2 ballots in the middle, they did not work. And then white smoke in the middle of the afternoon, because when the Pope is elected, you go. You don't wait for another vote. Okay? So that's why. So you wait for 2 smokes per day, not 4. It's not that every time they vote, there is the smoke. 2 smokes per day, 4 ballots per day. From outside, you can assess some things. Because, I will leave everything to you, but this is interesting. How do the election work? The dean explains the regulations, he says what we're gonna do, blah, blah, blah. And then, in order, from the last of the cardinals to the first, they write the name. In these papers, it's written, eligo in summum pontificem. And then they have to put the name of the person they want, the cardinal they want, or whoever they want, because it can also not be a cardinal. Then they fold. 1 time, 2 times, fold it. After this operation, each of them, they take this sheet of paper, fold it. They have to keep it like this. Must be visible. They do all the procession to the center, to, like you see here. Here. No, just better like this. Here. They do all the procession, they go in front. So, come on. And then they swear. They say, I swear that I chose as Supreme Pontiff the person that I consider, and this I say in front of God. 1. Then, again, the other guy stands up, ballot, and all of them recites the formula. Because, as I said, it's personal responsibility. So all of them has to recite the formula. Yes?
So the order they do this is they start with the youngest?
Yeah, they start with the youngest, yes. The youngest created.
Yes, of course, but so that someone who is further away, he has more time to write the name?
No, because they have to write all together, and then all together they go. Okay? But it's very long. it takes time, because in this case you had 134 people, and each of them have to do that. Then there is also one possibility. Some cardinals can be sick, but still they're eligible to vote in a conclave. And as I said a couple of lessons ago, every cardinal has the duty and the right to vote. So, among the people that were in that are not cardinals, there are the so-called infirmari. The infirmari are the people who take care of the sick. When a cardinal is too sick to get to the Sistine Chapel, he stays in his room in Santa Marta. He votes, the infirmari goes to take the ballot, fold it, he brings the ballot, he oversees the operation, he brings the ballot, and then he has to give it to the secretary of the conclave that gives it to the dean. So it will take more time, because everybody has to vote. And the formula, I will read you the exact formula. So each cardinal receives at least 2 or 3 ballots, because they must be able to vote every ballot. The formula is in Italian, I wanted to read that. And it says, chiamo a testimone Cristo Signore, il quale mi giudicherà, che il mio voto è dato a colui che secondo Dio ritengo debba essere scelto. I call as my witness Christ the Lord, who will be my judge, that my vote is given to the one whom I believe should be elected according to God. Can you feel the power of this thing? 134 people, they have to swear this thing every single moment they vote. At least it calls a responsibility. At least they have to weigh what they're doing. There is a reason why you do that. Then after that, after the vote operation ends, there is the dean of the College of Cardinals. There are 3 cardinals, and they start counting the votes. There is like a stripe, and they just read a ballot, sign, put. Ballot, sign. They have to read every ballot. Then they have to say if the vote went well or not. And then after that, if the ballot did not went well, and it's the first ballot of the morning or the afternoon, they start the operations again. If the second ballot does not go well, they stop, they pray, and then they burn everything. Not only the ballots, they burn every single note they took. You saw they were papers, so some of them take notes. They want to know how much votes somebody got, or if it's close or not. Everything that is there around is burned, because it's a secret procedure. It's a ritual and it's a secret procedure. There is only one testimony that is generally, there is a report by the dean, but the report stays secret. So we have some of the reports from the past. They have to sit before the altar, because it's a religious thing. The conclave is a rite. You sit before the altar. Also because the altar in the Sistine Chapel is still the Tridentine altar. So you celebrate, you are here. So you cannot be behind the altar, but in front of the altar. Then there is one issue that happened in the last 2 conclaves. In a couple of cases, the papers got stick together. So in one case, there were like 100, I don't know how much votes, and let's say 122 votes, 122 votes, 123 sheets, because one got stick. What do you do? Generally, the vote is invalid. So in that case, they just replicated the vote very quickly. But it's somebody questions that. According to regulations, they should do everything from the scratch. But still. These are the ovens where they burn things. These are not the ovens where they burn when they burn the votes. The votes are burned in the place with the chimney where you can see the smoke. But there are ovens for everything. Here, just outside, just built. This is one important environment, but this is the most important environment. This is called the tierce room. It's actually the sacristy. It's the sacristy behind the altar. Why tierce room? You see, this is a picture, it's an official picture. When a pope is elected, you don't know if the pope is tall, is short, is fat, is thin, you don't know. So you prepare 3 white cassocks, 1 mozzetta, because mozzetta is fine, and 3 of this, with different measures. And then there is a tailor, another of the ones who have to sworn in, that has to adapt very quickly when the pope is elected, because you don't know who the pope is. So this is all prepared before. Why it's called the tierce room? Because it is said that when the pope is elected and he accepts the election, he goes there and he starts crying because he thinks of his new responsibility. It's a tragic moment for many people. There is a phone there. It's fun because when Benedict XVI was elected, he tried to call his brother, and his brother didn't pick the call. So there was this number keeping ringing, but brother didn't keep the call. I can tell you, not because it's a secret, but because its brother, Ratzinger brother, wrote it in his autobiography. So it's not, we can tell for that. And this is the Sistine Chapel all prepared with no cardinals. I wanted to give you a general overview because you see, these are all the parts they have to do. Every time, every single time. That's why it takes time. That's why it takes time, and that's why you never know when the white smoke is gonna come. It takes time because it depends if cardinals are quick or not in walking, if cardinals are quick or not in voting, if cardinals are quick or not in reading the votes. But if you have some experience, you start understanding things from outside. When Pope Leo was elected, the white smoke of the morning that came around midday came pretty much 10 to 12-ish, if I remember well. So it was very, very early, considering that they start voting at 9:30, because they meet all together, they have mass, then they go, then 9 there is the lauds, the Lodi, and then after that they vote. There is always prayer, always mass, always laudes. You don't skip that. It's right. It's right. So they start 9:30. Consider 1 hour and a half to do 130 people going there back and forth. And so generally you end by 1 p.m. So we were waiting for 1 p.m. When I saw the white smoke very quick, like almost 12, we immediately understand that they were pretty much there, because when it's quick, it means that they were very quick in reading, which means that they had just 1 name, or 2 or 3. Because when you have many names, it takes more time to make the count. So actually, I called Dome after I saw the black smoke, and I said, listen, don't wait for me because they're making the Pope now. Because you tend to know at one point. Then we figured that in the morning, third ballot, Leo was just missing 4 votes to become Pope. 4. And I mean, 4 votes is nothing. So much that Leo knew, so much that during lunchtime, he went to the chapel and prepared the speech. He read the speech. He's the first Pope ever to read a speech. And he read it because he knew. So that's the story. It takes time. And this is the main character of that. It's the chimney. I wanted to show this because the chimney is here. Sistine Chapel is not far away. You saw the map yesterday. In the map yesterday, you could see that, Sistine Chapel is right behind St. Peter. So all the gazes are set to the chimney. How do they do the white and black smoke? Well, once they used some cover, blankets and whatsoever. It worked, but not perfectly. Then in the recent times they started using some special powder or whatsoever to show that it's really much black or really much white, because in case they also ring bells now, if the Pope is elected. They ring the bells so everybody knows that the Pope is elected. As I told you, this voting operation take a lot of time. But why it's important they are made that way? First of all, because you need to consider all the time that this is a ritual. This is actually a liturgical moment. The election of the Pope is not something that deals with politics. Shouldn't do. Then, obviously, cardinals, they live all together in Santa Marta. They speak. Obviously, they also speak about people they like or they don't like. I mean, it would be naive not to think about that. But the big issue is that you should pray. So, even in a very pragmatic situation, everything obliges you to pray. You're completely obliged to do that. There is no way to get out of the scheme. Mass, lauds, votes, ora media, lunch, rest, ora quarta, ora sesta, votes, vespers, dinner, and again, every day. Every single freaking day. Every time you go and you swear. And the more you do that, the more you feel the responsibility. And it's a way to detach. Why do you need this? Because it's a way to detach your pragmatic things from the other situations that are prayer, mostly. You need that to give a dignity to what you're doing. Why is it secret? That's the big question. I mean, I had questions in the press office by a journalist who happens to be a priest also, so it's even funnier, that asked why they were not going to televise the votes. The votes are secret because, as I told you in the beginning, the search is for communion. We're not looking for a majority or a minority. If the search is for communion, and the vote is transparent outside, then when the ballots goes like, there is one cardinal gets 60 votes and another gets 30, which is already a lot, but not enough, there can be some pressure to go somewhere or somewhere else. Like it happens in every political situation. If you keep the vote secret, if you keep this procedure secret, you avoid external pressures. It's pretty much history that John Paul II was elected in 1978 for two main reasons. I would say three. First reason was that John Paul II was not unknown. Everybody is talking about a surprise election, but John Paul II was very well known among the cardinals. And Paul VI loved him that much that actually invited Cardinal Wojtyła to preach the Lenten spiritual exercises to the Curia. So, the Roman Curia, when it's Lent, there is 1 week every year, no matter what, that they stop working and have these Lenten spiritual exercises when there is a preacher that the Pope chooses, and this preacher goes for 5 days, morning and afternoon, to deliver a preaching. And then they have to meditate. Because still the Catholic Church is a religious place, you know, they're not just governing. But when somebody is chosen, it's the good moment when everybody in the Curia knows you. And everybody outside knows you because the preaching are not secret, they're published. So, when Paul VI chose Wojtyła in 1976 to preach the Lenten spiritual exercises, it was a signal. He was saying, you should look after this guy. There were many meanings behind that. One was that it was like the jubilee of the of the Polish church, and Paul VI wanted to visit Poland for it was the Jubilee of the Baptism, like 960th or 60th anniversary of the baptism of Poland, but John Paul II, Paul VI couldn't go because Poland was under communism. So you choose a cardinal from Poland and a guy you like, and everybody knows him. So when they came to a sort of division or a sort of indecision, Wojtyła was a normal choice because they knew him. Then the second reason was, and this is the issue, that after John Paul I died, there were two main candidates, two main cardinals. One was Cardinal Siri, one Cardinal Benelli. Now, you read newspapers, you see Cardinal Siri, Cardinal Giuseppe Siri was Archbishop of Genoa, was considered one of the biggest conservative cardinals. He was not. But Siri has been like a front runner for 3 conclaves. He was cardinal since he was 52 or so. And Benelli was considered a progressive. It happened that Siri granted an interview with the agreement that the interview was not going to be published before the conclave, so that his fellow cardinals were not going to see it. But it was a trap, and they published the interview the day of the conclave, when they were not in the conclave yet. So the newspaper, the copies of the interview were delivered to the tables, or to the desks of the cardinals. And so the cardinals freaked a little out and didn't want Siri anymore because there was this interview. And so that's why they got stuck in votes at one point. And this is one of the good reasons why you have secrecy and all the procedure. Third reason why John Paul II was elected Pope is beyond media and it's beyond the knowledge. It's because he was very charismatic and they needed some change or shift in that moment. Because, you know, even with John Paul I, they were looking for something different. They needed a generational shift. So it was the right moment for that. But you see, if you get back to the conclave that Paul VI left, mostly Europe, but internationalized, not so many Italians anymore, not as many Italians as before. These things actually matter. I was telling you yesterday that Pope Francis made a very specific college of cardinals, because Pope Francis made a decision that he wanted the College of Cardinals as representative as he could of the world issues, which meant that in many cases he didn't pick the cardinal, he picked the place. For instance, we have a Ukrainian cardinal that is actually Archbishop of Australia, but it's Ukrainian. It's for the Greek Ukrainian Catholic, Cardinal Bechok. And it's been picked mostly because the Pope wanted to give a new cardinal to Oceania because Cardinal Pell died, and a cardinal to Ukrainians, but without going to Ukraine because there could have been issues with the Russians. So if you start thinking that way, you have a lot of cardinals that have been selected mostly because they belong to a specific part of the world. Most of these people, not only they're not known in Rome, they never studied in Rome. You know, 20 years ago, every priest at one point had a specialization in Rome. 2 years, 1 year, something. They came to Rome for a while to see how things went. Mostly because you needed to be in Rome to see things. But now, everything is different. And also the studies, theological studies, sometimes are as good as in Rome somewhere else. So most of these cardinals never came to Rome to study. Vast majority of these cardinals never came to Rome to work. They did not speak Italian. So, yesterday I was talking about you about that. This is Africa and Asia. This is what I call the silent majority. This is pretty important. It's enough to block the two-thirds. You don't get to two-thirds if you don't have these two. It's enough. But actually, these people, Asia and Africa, most of them, we know nothing about what they think. It's the silent majority. It's very crucial, it's very important, but we don't know what they think. While for all these other ones in Europe, we pretty much know where they're going, what they think, who they're friends to, because we see it. Because we see it. But we don't see what they do here. We don't, for many reasons, and because, for example, in Asia, you have so many languages that you don't go. But then you see, I wrote a book on the synod, and I went through all the synodal documents of the European stages. Asian documents were all in English, because Asians didn't find a common language. You know, you go to Vietnam, how many languages you have in Vietnam? You go to India, how many languages you have in India? You don't get a common language. Even in China, you have Mandarin, several things. So you don't get a common language for all the Asian countries. In Europe, in general, you use English, but you use also French, you use Italian. You know, you have a bunch of things. We did the document of the final stage, we did it in Italian and English, mostly. But Italian as a working language. But there is a working language because people in Europe goes to study in Rome at one point. But Asia don't. So most of the Asian cardinals, they speak English, but they don't get Italian. And this is a huge difference with this conclave, and also this conclave. Up to this conclave, they spoke Latin, because they all studied Latin, but pretty well. Ratzinger was very good in Italian. He spoke perfect Italian, with some accent, but perfect. But he knew Italian since the 60s, 70s, because he came to the council, he participated in the Second Vatican Council. But when he was appointed prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, so he came to work in Rome, he didn't feel secure enough to speak Italian. So for the first year, he spoke Latin, and everybody understood him. You know, they could have actual conversations in Latin, which you don't have anymore. From here on, But language changes a mentality. And that's another thing, you know, and that's why you need rituals. Rituals are always the same symbols. It's a language that does not change. You can see it. You know, these formulas, you can have them. They never change. So it's something that sticks to the point. The way you speak changes your mentality. I don't know if you ever read Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes was a semiotician in French, in France. And Barthes is one of the greatest of all time. And when he was enrolled in the Academy of France, he gave a lesson that you find online. It's called Lesson. It's one of the most beautiful texts I ever read in these things. And Barthes said one thing that will give you the explanation of this. He said, very provocatively, language is fascist. Language obliges me to speak with a you or without a you, according to the language. In French, language obliges me to speak male and female. I don't have the neutral. In English, I have the neutral. But these things change the way you think, because it's the way you explain things. In Italy, we have this kind of like normal phrase that we say that the people who went to classical high school, like I did, and we study ancient Greek, we speak differently. You know how we study ancient Greek in Italy? Ancient Greek is studied like that. They teach you the grammar, and they give you the so-called versions. So you have huge excerpts, and you have to translate them all the time. But Greek language has a way of moving that is very much argumentative. So you have sentence, sub-sentence, sub-sentence. Latin is different. Latin is synthetic. Latin is the language of Twitter. It's very quick. Item is est. Go, the mass is over. Item is est. Like, quick. Think about that. And when the language changes the way you think. English language, that was the common language in this conclave, is pragmatic. English language goes with concrete things. It doesn't have so many sub-sentences. English language works better when you speak with short sentences, no subjunctives. You can have subjunctives, but people get confused, generally. It's a different way of thinking. So when you get here, you have a very pragmatic conclave. Very pragmatic conclave means we're looking for somebody who understands what we want, who get the job done, and who is not a pain in the ass, forgive me the expression. Like, pretty much that. And that makes all the difference. The conclave that elected Francis was middle and middle, half and half. And mostly there was this kind of Anglo-Saxon idea that took over of the shift in narration. So the American cardinals, mostly, that were the rulers in this conclave, you see how America, US and Canada, they had a weight here, but there were some cardinals of big weight, like Cardinal George, that was like, because then persona is important. They were shocked. You had a renunciation. Never happened in recent history. So after a shock, what you do? You try something different. So Americans said, let's try for a generational shift. Latin Americans said, well, yeah, the generational shift, and it's this guy. And Europeans said, okay, if you want to do so, let's do that. It was half pragmatic, half visionary. John Paul II was Europeanly pragmatic, in the sense that we had a pope for 27 years. We don't have to throw everything away, but we need somebody who's not gonna be as protagonist as this pope was. So who's the guy? Benedict, because Benedict is like main collaborator. We know he's keeping the line. We know he's not going to be more protagonist than the other pope because he's humble. And above all, there were no scandals with Benedict. Yes, sorry, you need no scandals. Because from John Paul II on, you think also about the back life, the scandals, because you have media. I was talking with the cameraman before, why now we have so many pictures of this. This picture, 2013, you didn't have this picture. But not because it's a secret. This is the formula that is public. So it's not that you cannot take a picture of this formula. But because there were less photographers, less media. Things became more public with the increase of the media. Some of these things are mysterious mostly because nobody entered, because there was not the occasion. Just to say that these rituals are public, you know how they work. You need to know how they work. Because if you don't know how they work, you don't believe in what you're doing. You cannot believe it. If it's just a mystery, you cannot believe it. But so far, nobody could see it before. Now you see that every Sunday, the Pope gets out of his windows and prays the Angelus, or Regina Coeli now that it's Easter time. You know how far dates back this tradition? It's no more than 70 years. The first Pope to do that was Pius VII, 1954. It was an idea of an Italian guy that was his consultant, Luigi Gedda, a scientist mostly. A scientist that used to be the president of the Catholic Action and who happened to be a very good friend of the Pope. And he said, listen, people would love to see the Pope more often. But before that, you didn't see the Pope. You didn't. So we're talking about 1954. If you go on YouTube and you check the audiences of Pius XII, there are some that have been recorded. People are frantic, people are crazy, but because those people never saw the Pope. When the Pope was elected, it was the first time he spoke. He was seen. Nobody has seen the cardinals before. You know who was the first Pope who actually delivered a speech when he was elected? John Paul II. Until John Paul II, nobody could speak. The Pope was elected, came out, blessed. Ciao. John Paul I wanted to speak, and they told him, no, Holiness, we don't do that. They took the micro off. So, you know, the media exposure is something very new. We're talking about that because these things should be common knowledge, but they are not because nobody has seen them before. But there are rules that we follow. And these rules are important. They have a meaning. So this is pretty much whatever happens before the Pope is elected. Now I will leave to your questions for a while. Tomorrow we're going to finish to see what this Pope has done after he was elected. And I will give you a reading of the symbols so that you will see how this Pope makes some, not differences, but how he delivered the thing. And what happens next, generally. Just to give you an anticipation, for example, when there is the white smoke, well, you saw there is the room of tears, and then after the room of tears, the Pope goes back in the room, in the Sistine Chapel, and every cardinal has to pledge obedience. So after that, the Pope enters, and every freaking cardinal goes in procession one by one and pledge obedience to the Pope. So after that, before the announcement, you have about 1 hour. When you see the white smoke, everybody thinks that they're going out very quickly. 1 hour. No less than 1 hour. That's why I was pretty calm when it happened, but people freaked out. I saw actually people running from Castel Sant'Angelo, it's quite far away, just in order to be there in the square for the Pope, but actually you have 1 hour at least. And then during that moment, obviously, you know, white smoke, so it means it's official celebration. And what you do when there is an official celebration? There is the band. So the band of the Vatican Police comes. And then the band of the Italian state comes. And because they play the anthems. Because it's a state. And so, you know, it takes time. All this situation takes time. Seems it's not a trivial thing to organize a conclave or whatever, as you see. And you have to think about all these small meanings, because these small meanings actually matter.